The story of Tysons is the story of Fairfax County. What was once just a crossroads with a corner store has transformed into the economic engine of the county and the Commonwealth. Tysons now boasts a retail experience that attracts more visitors than Disneyland and has contributed close to $1 billion in spending just last year. It has over 92,000 employees across 4,600 businesses and is home to 5 Fortune 500 companies. And it will soon be home to more than 32,000 residents. Growth in the last half-century has been exponential. We've gone from a place where developers are helping farmhands with their cows to one defined by multi-billion-dollar company campuses. At 150 years, there are many stories to tell when it comes to Tysons. But one of the most essential and the focus of this special edition of Providence Perspectives is how public policy and the private sector have worked to foster unparalleled growth in this thriving urban center. In this segment, you'll hear from those who have been developing Tysons for the last half-century, including former county officials and staff, as well as business executives shaping the Tysons landscape of today.
We all think we know something about where Tysons Corner is because we've read in papers over the years that there was a man named Tyson who owned a lot of property around the intersection of now Route 7 and Route 123, and he was postmaster in, I believe, 1858 to 1864. And so his name was sort of given to that area. And we've all seen over the years in the newspaper the pictures going out Route 7 of the fruit stands and the stores on the corner. And there was a meat locker that people talk about and all kinds of small businesses. And we hear about the peach ice cream that people drove to Tysons to get. That's all there. But Tysons Corner is really the corner of where 7 and 123 intersect. It's a boundary. There is in the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan a boundary of Tysons Corner. It's called the Tysons Urban Center now. It's also now in 2 magisterial districts. It used to be in 3. It's mostly in Providence. A little bit of the southwest part, kind of along the border of Vienna, is in Hunter Mills still. Used to be, when it first was in there, that was Centerville District, but now it's in Hunter Mill. And there was a portion between the malls. In other words, Tysons Corner Center was in Providence, Tysons Galleria, that area was in Drainsville. And in the redistricting of 1991, there's always a redistricting, the part that was in Drainsville of this Tysons area came to Providence. So it's only been that much in Providence since 1991.
Tysons has definitely evolved over the last number of years. I think if we were looked at a pivotal point in Tysons and the creation of Tysons and what it is today, we would really look back at the creation of the Tysons Task Force back in 2005. That was established by then Supervisor Linda Smith and then Chairman Jerry Connolly. They established a task force made up of citizens, private sector individuals, county staff, and that task force met countless times over many years. And throughout that process, they established a really robust, comprehensive plan and vision for Tysons. And I think the reason that's so critical is it really allowed the private, public, and citizens to be part of the process and to establish a vision that was united and unified amongst everybody. And that's not an easy task when you're dealing with that many people. So it was really a critical moment for Tysons with the task force, and it's only grown and evolved since then in the best way.
They actually had, was it 200 or 300 meetings with the community and their own body, public meetings. And this went on for a good 3 years with all of the meetings to pull together what this vision would be. So if I had been a task force member, I think I would have been worn out by the end of it. But they held on and we came up with a vision. I asked Barbara to be part of this because our partnership with development in Tyson goes back, it was 20 years when I between when I was on the Board of Supervisor and the Planning Commission for Providence District. So I started on the Planning Commission in 1999 and retired from the board in 2019. And all of that time, I was working with Barbara on Tysons and many other things in Providence, of course. But I couldn't have managed without Barbara.
So that's mutual. During that time, I was either the director of the Zoning Evaluation Division, which is a group that manages applications for redevelopment, or the head of the department. And at that time, and probably still today, the majority of our zoning cases were in Providence. And so Linda had the yeoman's work at the board on land use, which has frequently been called the bread and butter of the board. Right. And so we had at least weekly meetings around the table in her office where we would go through the applications either together or with our applicants. So it is fair to say we spent a lot of time together over those 20 years.
I got into the development business in the 70s. It was actually November of 73. I was a medical service corps officer in the Air Force. I gravitated to the Northern Virginia area because my dad was stationed at the Pentagon, and I got a job at Fairfax Hospital, and I met this guy, and this guy happened to be one of the partners who owned a whole bunch of land at the intersection of 495 and 123, and it was called Tysons Corner. They had a few industrial buildings. It was an old dairy farm, Maplewood, that had recently burned down. And I had been working construction summers my whole life. So I left the hospital and went to work for then West Group, Jerry Halpin, Chuck Ewing, Tom Nicholson, and Colonel Rudolph Seeley and his wife, Martha. So when I went to work there, it was very, very early into the process, but these were guys that were visionaries. And they kept drawing, we kept doing drawings of what things might look like where Cap One is now, what that might look like in 10 years. And we were courting MITRE on the other side of the street. What MITRE might look like if we could do a little bit of work for MITRE, they might move from Boston down here. So the discussions were growth, and at the time, the magnitude of the growth seemed unimaginable, but probably 10% of what we ultimately ended up with the current plan. But they were visionaries. They advanced all of their infrastructure at that time, both on the inside of the Beltway, West Gate, and the outside of the Beltway, West Park. We were building roads so we could build buildings when the need came.
Now, the development that came in the 70s was what we call campus style or office park style. Kind of low-rise buildings set in the middle of giant parking lots, not real tall, mid-rise, I guess, and set back from the street. And you saw a lot of development. People came to Tysons because of the access. The board was interested in generating commercial development, office development as well, because Fairfax Countyans at the time, more of them worked out of the county than worked in the county. And so it was important to have the development at Tysons and other places in the county, but a lot of it came to Tysons in order to have jobs available for people into the county, because it was a problem that everyone commuted back and forth in the morning.
To create a city and to really have a city, and this is basically a city, you can't just have 3 uses. You can't have retail, residential, office, and 4 uses. Retail, residential, office, and hotels. You can't do that. You need every kind of use there is. You need restaurants, you need entertainment, you need places of worship, you name it, you need it. If you go to any city, it evolves over time, and those things organically happen. And we had to be sure that there was the openness and the room for those things to happen, or nobody would come here. They'd come and they might live here and go away to work, or they might work here and go home at night. But we wanted them to stay and have all the things that you have in a city available within, hopefully, a walking distance of them.
Or metro ride.
So in the studies of extending rail to Tysons, of which there were several, one of the things that was talked about was, do you just go out the toll road, or do you go through Tysons? And if you just, the studies pretty much showed that if you just went out the toll road and didn't go into Tysons, it didn't do much. But Tysons became the part of that project that was both an origin and a destination of riders. And that's important because it also makes the system pay for itself better. It serves more people. And so hence the 4 stations that opened in, well, there were 5 that actually opened. One went to Wheelie, in through Tysons. But there was a lot of talk about why didn't we build it underground. There's a lot of water under Tysons, and there are several different creeks flowing around under there. There are tanks under there, under parts and buildings in Tysons to contain water. You know, you have areas where retention ponds and other places, they're in tanks in Tysons. It would be extremely expensive to do tunnels all the way under because of the water. There has been in the existing metro station a lot of difficulty with water under there. We've gone through the years that, I guess it's 50 years of metro now, we know that stations leak, and we work real hard to keep them from doing that. So that added to the expense. And then the topography. But the other thing that I should mention is that the expense would have exceeded what the federal government would have allowed in order for it to take part in contributing to the system. And the localities involved, Fairfax mostly and Loudoun, couldn't have swung that. It would have made the funding of the operation impossible. Not impossible, but we wouldn't have it yet. We would be building it inch by inch.
The pivotal point in the development of Tysons was Tysons with rail and a new master plan. New master plan contingent upon rail, and then rail contingent upon financing. Okay? So remember all of the work that went into getting MWA to agree to allow Fairfax and the state of Virginia with federal financing to extend rail to the airport. And that would be through Tysons. And a lot of work went into that agreement to allow that. It was supposed to go all the way to the airport, but if you remember, we did it in a couple of phases. But on the phase 1 rail, which I'm most familiar with, it was a great idea. A lot of work went into deciding how much it was going to cost. It was, and back in those days, it was a $1.3 billion project. So the feds decided they would come up with their money if they could get matching money from the state and Fairfax County. The county's part of that, the county who really wanted this rail, and we knew that we would grow Tysons. It was called the Golden Goose at the time. We would grow Tysons into this magnificent city, but we needed public transportation within Tysons to connect us to the rest of the Washington metropolitan area, but certainly to get us to the airport, but in and around Tysons Corner. So the county had an obligation to get rail built. Fairfax County's part of this was about 16%, $400 million. Fairfax County Board of Supervisors discussed it. Nobody wanted to increase tolls on the toll road. Okay, the people using already had high tolls, but paying more tolls and getting no benefit of the rail because they decided to drive and pay the higher tolls. That wasn't an option. Raising of taxes at that time was not an option. And cutting the budget, capital budget and operating budget for Fairfax County wasn't an option. So the Board of Supervisors turned around to the business community and said, guys, if you want rail, want more height, want more density, want to build your city, you go figure out how to fund this $400 million. That kind of came back to 3 of the big landowners around the 123 corridor. That was West Group, between West Group, Macerich with Tysons 1 and Lerner with Tysons 2, we were very close to getting a 51% majority of landowners to sign a petition for a tax district. We would tax ourselves to fund the capital, the $400 million on a leveraged basis for 30 years to get this rail built. We put Chuck Robb, Senator Robb, retired, and Linwood Holton, one of the older governors that everybody just loved in Tysons Corner. He'd been around forever. And we'd put them in a car and we'd take them around and we'd have them talk to all these landowners. In other words, use their gravitas and their experience trying to get people to sign up for this this tax district. And we kind of got down to where we were time was running out on the approval of the federal funding. And we were very, very close to the 51%. But as you know, it's that last 10 people that we had a very difficult time getting. We had to get one extension of the federal funding, which required Governor Tim Kaine at that time, and with Jerry Connolly on the Hill going to get an extension till we got this tax district done. It was a collaboration you would never, I don't know if you could ever put together again, but it was required that kind of horsepower, that kind of dedication, that kind of commitment late in the game to finally get this thing done.
It's how do we together shape the future? And part of it has always been planning commissioner or supervisor. How do we bring the public into that discussion? Because ultimately there has to be buy-in from everyone on this. And that was really the remarkable thing about Tysons. It was a huge project, 5 years of discussion, so many different interests from the established neighborhoods looking at a huge change, the development community chafing at the bit to get going. But they all sat down together and worked through things piece by piece, bit by bit. And when we had the public hearing, the final public hearing to adopt the Tysons plan, we had speaker after speaker come up and said, well, I'm not really sure about this or that. Might have done something a little different here, but we can live with it. And it was basically the community coming together and saying, you know, this is a good starting point. This will work for us. We might want to change things at some other time in the future, but we're going to start here and we can all agree to do that.
So an interesting story was Gannett USA Today in West Park. We competed with other developers in the Washington metropolitan area. And prior to that, it was kind of a national search, but we finally snagged USA Today Gannett corporate headquarters out of Arlington and moved them to 1750 Jones Branch Drive, which is a parcel of land right next to the Dulles Toll Road, north side of West Park. And if you remember, that was an 819,000 square foot 2-tower building. But Gannett wanted the same visibility that they had down in Clarendon and down in Roslyn, and they wanted a 300-foot high building. Okay, unheard of. And try to take that through a rezoning and a special exception for additional height. And the amount of all the pushback I got in 50 years of rezoning, the greatest not battle, but discussion and trying to prove a point back and forth was with McLean Hamlet on the height of the Gannett building in West Park. If you remember, they had to look all the way across the Dulles Toll Road to this parcel. We proved by all kinds of topographic and visuals that they'd look right over the top of this building, were fighting us to the death. So in the very beginning, the biggest obstacles we had to was not open space, not ADUs, not transportation management. The first battles all saw height as an imposition or the beginning of the end to the communities and the surrounding areas, because we were interrupting their visual landscape of the surrounding areas.
Let's look back at Fairfax County. We're suburbia. And the developers had been developing suburban office parks. So there was going to have to be a major mind shift, not just in terms of how staff looked at this in the comprehensive plan, but how developers were actually going to go about building things. Some of them just started bringing us things that look like shoeboxes on steroids, just very, very tall buildings, very square. It would have been a wall, not a skyline. So it took a while and a lot of discussions to get down to what is really going to make this into something that is spectacular. How do we get architecture instead of the usual? How do we get designs that are really urban designs that bring the elements that we need to have together? What about open space? What about landscaping? The pedestrian scale? How does all of these things, how do they all relate to people? The ones who will work in the offices, who will live there, who will shop there, and use Metro to boot, because that was another piece of the design. And the whole purpose for changing the plan for Tysons is transit.
So our original vision was to create a true mixed-use place with lots of retail, lots of residential, and lots of office, parks, public parks, activation, all mixed together. We took 2 years to design what is now the Boro, and a phase one of 1.7 million with 300,000 square feet of retail, 700,000 square feet of resi, and 500,000 square feet of office, all mixed in with parks and activation. So that was by intention, by design. Unlike anything you see in Tysons. For us, SCIC owned so much of this property, we had free reign east of Route 7 and north of 123 to buy 30 acres and create our own street grids. So we had the logistical, to allow us to happen, with the vision to allow it to happen, which is why the borough is will be different, and is different from the other metro nodes around Tysons.
And so when the Tysons Corner Center opened in 1968, it was just sort of the beginning of opening the door to lots of development. The Galleria didn't come along until '88, but think about that. That's 2 huge malls right next to each other. And I'll probably say this 10 times while I'm talking to you, but having 2 large malls like that right next to each other, and Tysons is now the 8th largest in the country. There are mixed-use developments more than they were, but those are 2 huge malls right next to each other. And you have to think about that in protecting access for those 2 malls, because they are, you can't kill the golden goose. They are a giant revenue generator both for the county and the state.
Retail in Tysons has changed over time. I mean, when we look back at decades ago, Tysons Corner Center opened in 1968. It was a 1-level shopping center. Today we're 2 levels at 2.4 million square feet, and have been receiving feedback and attendance at the shopping center like we've never seen before. Year over year, our numbers are growing exponentially. So the shopping center continues to be a driving force in Tysons and continues to be, frankly, knocking it out of the park, which we're really proud of. But I think when we look at Tysons, the community, and think about retail across the board, it really has evolved. Now we have more than just the one shopping center. We have multiple shopping centers and multiple shopping destinations. So retail has evolved and grown in Tysons. It's no longer, I don't think Tysons' reputation anymore is strip centers and office parks. It is certainly still the shopping center, and we're proud of that, but it's also so much more. So retail has changed over time as well. Obviously, decades ago, people were not shopping online, and right now you don't really need to leave your house to buy anything you want for the most part. We take that seriously at the shopping center, and we focus on bringing people into the space, which I think more and more people are enjoying that. And we're seeing a lot of positive response to events at the shopping center, improvements at the shopping center, improvements in tenants, new tenants. So across the board, we're seeing in general that people are coming back to shopping centers and doing so more and more than they were before.
In 2012, we raised a $1 billion real estate private equity investment fund to invest in distress from the GFC and value add opportunities in the DC metro area. So we're thinking, okay, how about Tysons? Tysons, what's good about it? The 11th largest office market in the country, bigger than Denver and Pittsburgh. Some of the best demographics in the country, job growth in defense and tech, great. Literally throw a dart anywhere in the middle of Fairfax County, where Tysons is, and you're going to see some of the highest incomes in any 1 mile ring, 3 mile ring, 5 mile ring in the country, more so than the beloved Sunbelt cities. And then we're thinking, okay, Tysons. In the go-go 80s and 90s, Tysons was on fire. Rental tenant absorption, double that of downtown DC, double that of really any submarket in the area. Bethesda, Arlington, it was just going crazy. And then when we raised our fund, by 2013, Tysons was dead. Why? Because in the 80s and 90s, everybody wanted to be in drivable suburban locations. They wanted freeway hugging office buildings. All of it was drivable, no retail, no amenities. But by the early 2010s, everything changed. So 2 things happened. In 2010, Fairfax County implemented a comprehensive plan to allow for over 100 million square feet of development around the 4 metro nodes. The Silver Line was extended all the way from DC all the way to Dulles Airport and beyond. And that triggered over 100 million square feet of development area. And at the same time, billions of dollars were spent, not only on the metro, but on transportation infrastructure along I-495 with the hot lanes. And so here we are, where the county's not for free, but is giving developers an opportunity to create the next Roslyn-Boston corridor. And we want to take advantage of that in our fund.
One of the pivotal moments in Tysons to me was when Capital One decided to relocate its headquarters to Tysons. I can remember being in the room during the discussions about where did Capital One want to relocate to, and there was a big push from Fairfax County to bring them to Tysons, and it certainly has made a big difference in the growth and creation of Tysons and what it is today. Along those same lines, you can't think about Tysons without thinking about the Silver Line and the Metro's arrival in Tysons. This has certainly changed the trajectory of Tysons and made it even more multimodal, urbanized, and allowed for transit-oriented development, which was more challenging without Metro's arrival. But I think also it's critical to think about one of the major developments that occurred after Metro or alongside Metro was the new mixed-use development that opened at Tysons Corner Center's front door, connecting the Tysons Metro station to Tysons Corner Center Mall. So we went from being a shopping center, a major shopping center, the largest shopping center in the region, to being really its own community or city with residential, office, hotel, and everything connected by a unifying plaza, which is an event space, a placemaking space, and it all connects directly to rail. So there are so many pivotal moments in Tysons, and these are just a few of many.
So Tysons does look very different than it did 20 years ago. I was born and raised here in Fairfax County. I went to high school here. I met my wife in high school. We're raising our kids here. So I've seen Fairfax evolve, and nothing's evolved faster than Tysons. And I think one of the biggest changes since that evolution is the amount of residents that now call Tysons home, that we have a great strong base in an office market. We have our hugely successful retail in the malls. But now having that 24/7 activation to have residents here that truly then require the nightlife that we can provide makes Tysons more of a 24/7 city than a 9-to-5 work destination.
There's the synergy of the uses. That is what we were really looking for. If you have a good office component, people will want to go someplace for lunch, or they might want to stay later and go to dinner or a show. But that's it. That's a vital part of that daytime synergy. If the people living in Tysons might be getting on Metro and going off to work someplace else, you don't want a residential ghost town. You need to have the people coming in for the retail, for the hotels, for the offices that help stabilize the businesses that are there within Tysons during the day.
I'm going to give props to some of our friends in Fairfax County I'd say the first pivotal moment was Macerich, building out Tysons Tower, the Vita, and the Hyatt Regency. That was the first attempt successfully at any kind of a live-work play. They were limited by the fact that they were connected to the mall, but that was the first pivotal moment. The second was Capital One and all the money that they put into their own headquarters. The two towers that were built in late 2018 and 2022, I think, and everything that went along with that, the Capital One Hall, the vault, what they created for their own people really helped create a destination for Tysons. And then I think, obviously, I'm biased, but the most pivotal is what we did here, because we created, for the first time ever in Tysons, and really for the first time in the western part of Northern Virginia, a true walkable urban place with street grids, with parks, with programming, with every day something's going on between the residents and the workers and the retailers.
I had been talking to, again, some of our nonprofits, the McLean Orchestra. I'd been to some of their events and concerts. They were performing at what had been the old McLean Bible Church, and then it became a girls' school. But they knew that very shortly they were going to be looking for a new home. And there's no place for an orchestra, a community orchestra. There just isn't anything that has the stage, the acoustics, the space. So I was thinking about that and thinking about Cap One coming back. And I called Barbara and I said, what if we talked to them about a concert hall, a performing arts place?
Originally, the campus was inwardly oriented, and we talked to them a lot about making it more of a place, kind of like a mosaic place, or kind of like it is today. And at first, like you said, they said, no, no, no. And then one day they came back and they said, you're right. We really need to make this a better place, a place that really is for the community, not just for us. So the same thing happened here. We had constant meetings with them, and throughout their original rezoning, and then when we started to think about redoing it. And one day, so we talked, and the arts plan had come out, and that also called for a performing arts center. And so we knew there was a need. So one day in one of our meetings, we said, what would you think about? And of course, the initial reaction is always,
They hadn't thought about
they had not thought about it.
No.
And they said, well, let us think about it and get back to it. And pretty quickly, we got the word back that they were interested in working with us on it, which was wonderful. And that started an amazing process for us.
Well, and what they had thought about was how it would actually work out for their corporation, as a matter of fact, because it was a place where they could hold corporate events, training, all sorts of things that actually fitted with what they were planning on doing. And then it just had this other public-private partnership side to it as well. But that was something of a long road from everybody saying, oh, what a good idea, to how do we make it work?
And we hired consultants to verify that there was a need, and that went on for quite a while. But at the end of the day, they hired a world-class architect. To their credit, this is a world-class performing hall. The acoustics are amazing. And I mean, it's beautiful. And I believe they're really proud of it, as are we. And the part of it also that we don't talk about as much, but is wonderful, is the Perch, which really is an integral part of it, which now has almost become the central park of Tysons, even though it's upstairs.
When the comprehensive plan for Tysons was originally approved, it contemplated the idea that to execute this vision, there needed to be an implementation entity, an entity that really had the privilege to just focus on Tysons. We are an urban center within a larger county, so we needed to have a group that could just really focus and dedicate all the time and intention that this economic engine for the county really needed. And that originally started as the Tysons Partnership, which was made up of private sector companies and key stakeholders. And then that got to its peak. And then after the partnership got to all it could accomplish, we worked hand in hand with the county, with the chairman, with Supervisor Palchek, and with the county executive and his team to craft a new way to do place-led economic development. The Tysons growth has happened in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, we're just over 1 decade through with the comprehensive plan, but we've already seen what was a regional shopping and office destination become a true urban center. And I think that there are a few things that really went together with that. One is the county understands the importance of Tysons for the whole county. And then another important thing is that there's a lot of public-private partnerships. No one entity is big enough to make this succeed on its own. So it really has been that collaborative partnership of residents, of the business community, of the developers, of the county officials and staff. And that comes together and becomes embodied as the TCA. And so we help move that forward.
Over the last number of years, we've seen people come back to shopping in shopping centers like Tysons Corner Center, and I think a big draw for them is it's more of an experience now. We have more experiential tenants at Tysons Corner Center with opening new tenants in the shopping center over time, but we're really seeing that more and more shoppers are looking for more than just coming in, purchasing something and going home. So they want to come and eat, they want to recreate, they want to meet up with friends, they want to have happy hour, and sometimes they also don't want to get on the road at 5 o'clock. They want to kind of spread the peak or extend their time on the site before they get in their cars or get on Metro to go home. So it's becoming more of a campus that's more urbanized and more of a city, and people can come and spend the entire day or the entire evening there. It's not just coming, buying one thing, and then heading home.
I think one of the best things about the process we're going through in developing Tysons is it's a constant learning experience where we are our own demonstration projects and learning from them and really reevaluating what worked, what didn't, to constantly improve the process. And that's the benefit of having a public-private partnership where we have that relationship with the county, where we can say, hey, both sides can say, this is what worked and this is what didn't, and how do we truly make it better? I think that Tysons, everyone had, when it was 2012 timeframe, pre-pandemic, we all had a very different idea of what the future was going to be. And I don't think anybody had on their bingo card what happened over the next decade.
So I think when we first started the Tysons comp plan process, there was a fear of density. That's not uncommon. That's pretty typical throughout the US, that people are afraid of density and what it may mean. I think we've really proven in Tysons that density done well, density in the right places, the right kind of development can really be quite successful, both for the private sector, the county, but also for the community. And I think people are really heralding this and really excited about what they're seeing.
It was a huge team effort. And it's that collective pride that really counts in the long term. That's what's going to keep Tysons going, because the more people who have a stake in it, the better off Tysons will be through good times and bad. I'm glad that I had the time to do that, and I may be like some of those people at the public hearing saying, oh, I wish we'd done this or wish we'd done that. But I also knew that it was a long-term project and things would get worked out and changed. And that's what will happen. It's evolution. It's people doing this. And that's what we need to remember.
And what's so great about being an operator on the ground is you can touch, you could feel, you could see. I love coming here and I see happy people walking in and around saying, finally, Tysons has a cool place.
What's great to see is there are so many people passionate about this that it's not just one person working hard to make this happen. There are so many people that truly believe in the vision of Tysons across the public sector, the private sector, the community, that are truly, we're all rolling up our sleeves together to make this happen, and that's why I'm confident it will.
From our first office parks and the development of the Tysons Corner Mall to the arrival of the Silver Line, Tysons has transformed from a rural crossroads to the economic heart of Fairfax County and a model for forward-looking urban planning. Innovative transit options have allowed Tysons, even beyond the malls, to become not just a place to commute to or through, but a place to live, play, and shop, with innovative new developments like the Boro and the Capital One campus. In many ways, Tysons is just getting started, driving forward innovative models for how we address the county's housing needs, intergenerational living, and pursuing public-private partnerships in placemaking, like the Tysons Community Alliance. One thing is clear from this story: Tysons is synonymous with transformation, and we can only imagine what its future holds.